I never thought fairy tales could come true until I got my own evil stepmother. But let me start from the beginning. My name is Ashley, and my early childhood was what most would consider normal, even privileged. My parents were successful business people, living in a beautiful two-story house in Connecticut. Dad worked hard building his company from the ground up, while Mom had her own priorities. She was rarely home, always out with her friends, especially her best friend Diana. They were inseparable, getting their nails done, having long lunches at fancy cafes, shopping at expensive boutiques. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, doing homework alone while Dad heated up another microwave dinner. "Where's Mom?" I'd ask, though I already knew the answer. "She's out with Diana again, sweetheart," Dad would say, trying to hide his disappointment. "But hey, how about we make this dinner special? I bought your favorite ice cream for dessert." That was Dad, always trying to fill both roles, to make everything okay. But even his best efforts couldn't prevent what happened when I was 9. I still remember that day with painful clarity. Mom came home late, as usual, but instead of sneaking up to her room, she called for a family meeting. "I'm leaving," she announced, her voice eerily calm. "I've fallen in love with someone else. We're moving to Europe next month. You can keep full custody of Ashley." Just like that, my mother erased herself from my life. She packed her things the next day and disappeared, leaving behind a shell-shocked father and a confused 9-year-old girl who couldn't understand why she wasn't enough for her own mother. That's when Diana started coming around more often. At first, I was glad to see her. She was familiar, a connection to my mom. She'd cook dinner for us, help me with my homework, and clean the house. She was everything Mom hadn't been. Dad seemed to brighten whenever she was around. Within months, they started dating, and 6 months after Mom left, Dad announced they were getting married. I remember feeling relieved. Diana had been so kind, so attentive. Maybe this was the mother figure I'd been missing. "Are you happy about this, Ashley?" Dad asked me after he told me about the engagement. "Yes," I said, nodding enthusiastically. "Diana's nice. She takes care of us." The wedding was beautiful, and Diana looked perfect in her white dress. She hugged me during the reception and whispered, "We're going to be such a happy family." I believed her. God, how I believed her. While they were on their honeymoon, I stayed with my grandmother, Dad's mom. Those were the last truly peaceful days I would have for a very long time. The day I returned from Grandma's house, I knew something was different the moment I walked through the door. Diana was sitting at the kitchen table, her posture rigid, hands folded neatly in front of her. Dad was there too, looking uncomfortable. "Ashley," Diana said, her voice lacking its usual warmth, "we need to talk about some changes." I sat down, still wearing my backpack from Grandma's. Dad shifted in his chair, not meeting my eyes. "Your father and I have been discussing your upbringing," Diana continued, her eyes fixed on me. "I've noticed some concerning similarities between you and your mother." "What do you mean?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "The way you act, your attitude, it's clear you need more structure. More discipline." She turned to Dad. "Don't you agree, honey? We don't want her turning out like her mother." I watched Dad's face carefully. He frowned slightly, clearly uncomfortable. "Well, maybe some structure would be good." "I'll handle everything," Diana quickly assured him, patting his hand. "You're so busy with work, darling. Let me take care of this." And just like that, my life changed. The next day, Diana laid out her new rules. First came the changes to my wardrobe. "We'll only be shopping at sales from now on," she announced. "Designer clothes are a waste of money for a growing girl." But that was just the beginning. The following weekend, when Dad usually gave me my weekly allowance, Diana intercepted. "About your pocket money," she said, her voice sickly sweet. "From now on, you'll have to earn it. Straight A's only. 1B, and no allowance for the week." "But Dad always," I started to protest. "Your father agrees with me," she cut me off. "Don't you, dear?" Dad, buried in his work laptop, just nodded absently. Listen to Diana, Ashley. She knows what's best. The rules got stricter with each passing week. Diana started keeping a notebook, a detailed record of my every transgression. One morning, I rushed to school without making my bed. It went in the notebook. A glass left on the counter instead of being put in the dishwasher? In the notebook. Homework completed but not filed properly in my folder? Another mark. Every Friday, she'd sit me down and go through the list. Bed unmade on Monday, dishes left out on Wednesday, room not vacuumed on Thursday. She'd read with cold satisfaction. Well, it looks like no pocket money this week either. Maybe next week you'll try harder. I watched my previous life slip away, replaced by endless rules and restrictions. The worst part wasn't even the rules themselves, it was how she'd transformed from the warm, caring woman who'd helped with my homework into this cold, calculating figure who seemed to take pleasure in finding my faults. And my father, the man who used to be my biggest defender, had become a silent observer, too busy with work to notice what was happening in his own home. I tried talking to Dad multiple times about Diana's rules, catching him on rare moments when he wasn't buried in work. Dad, can we talk? I approached him one evening in his home office. He barely looked up from his computer screen. What is it, Ashley? I'm really busy right now. It's about Diana, and all these rules. Don't you think they're a bit excessive? He finally stopped typing and sighed. Look, honey, I know things are different now, but Diana's doing all the hard work around here. She's managing the household while I'm trying to keep the business running. We should appreciate that. But Dad. Not now, Ashley. I have a conference call in 5 minutes. Thank God for Grandma. She was the only one who saw through Diana's perfect stepmother act. During one of her visits, she overheard Diana berating me for leaving a textbook on the coffee table. This is ridiculous, Grandma exploded. She's a child, not a soldier in boot camp. The argument that followed was explosive. Diana played the victim perfectly, crying to Dad about how his mother was undermining her parenting. Your mother doesn't respect my position in this family, she sobbed. How can I raise Ashley properly with her constantly interfering? Dad, as usual, took Diana's side. The fight with Grandma was ugly. If you can't support my wife, he told her, maybe you should stop coming around for a while. Just like that, Grandma's regular visits stopped. But I found my way to her house after school whenever I could. She lived just 15 blocks away, and those visits became my sanctuary. Don't let her break your spirit, sweetheart, Grandma would say, slipping me $20. Hide this where she won't find it. I became an expert at hiding things, money, small gifts from Grandma, even my emotions. I had a loose floorboard under my bed where I kept my secret stash. Every time Diana's inspections got more intense, I'd touch that floorboard, reminding myself I had at least one person in my corner. Then came the conversation that changed everything. I was 15, heading to the kitchen for water late one night, when I heard voices from my parents' room. The door was cracked open, and Diana's words stopped me cold. She doesn't deserve to have you pay for her college, Diana was saying. You've seen how she behaves. All that attitude, just like her mother. If you keep pampering her like this, she'll end up exactly the same way, running off and abandoning her family. I held my breath, waiting for Dad to defend me. The silence stretched out painfully. Maybe you're right, he finally said, uncertainty clear in his voice. But we did promise. Promises to ungrateful children need to be reconsidered, Diana pushed. Think about it, darling. We could use that money for our future instead. I didn't stay to hear more. Back in my room, I lay awake for hours, Diana's words echoing in my head. I knew her influence over Dad would only grow stronger. If I wanted a future, I'd have to make it happen myself. That night, I made a decision. I would study harder than ever before. Every free moment would be dedicated to schoolwork. I would get a full scholarship to college if it killed me. The next 2 years became a blur of studying, extracurricular activities, and competitions. I joined every academic club I could find: debate team, science club, math club. My weekends were spent either studying or participating in state competitions. The trophy shelf in my room slowly filled up with awards: first place in the state science fair, top speaker at the regional debate championship, perfect score on the math Olympiad. Diana couldn't stand it. Every achievement, every award seemed to irritate her more. But she couldn't criticize me anymore, not when teachers were calling home to praise my performance, not when local newspapers were featuring my academic achievements. Finally, graduation day arrived. I'd done it, a full scholarship to Marshall University in the neighboring state. The letter had come 2 weeks earlier, and I'd been waiting for the right moment to tell them. I chose dinner after graduation, thinking surely, on this day of all days, even Diana couldn't ruin things. I got into Marshall, I announced, still wearing my graduation gown. Full academic scholarship. Dad's face lit up. That's amazing, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. For a moment, everything felt perfect. Then Diana wrapped her arms around Dad's shoulders, and I watched her face transform into that sickly sweet expression I'd grown to hate. "Oh, honey," she cooed, "this is wonderful news. But you know what would make it even better? If Ashley learned the value of true independence." Dad turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" "Well," Diana continued, her voice dripping with false concern, "we shouldn't spoil her too much. The scholarship is great, but maybe she should pay for her own housing? Get a job, learn some responsibility?" I watched in disbelief as Dad nodded slowly. "That actually makes sense." Something inside me snapped. All the years of pent-up frustration, all the silent suffering, everything came pouring out at once. "Makes sense?" I stood up so quickly, my chair fell backward. "Nothing about this makes sense. You've let her control everything for years. She's turned this house into a prison, and you just sit there and nod along with whatever she says." "Ashley," Dad started, but I wasn't finished. "You already had money saved for my college." "I know you did, I heard you talking about it years ago." "But let me guess, Diana, you convinced him to spend it on something else, didn't you? Just like you convinced him to stop letting Grandma visit, to stop being my father." Diana's face turned red with rage. "How dare you," she shrieked, jumping up from her chair. "After everything we've done for you. Is this how you show gratitude?" "Gratitude?" I laughed bitterly. "For what? For making my teenage years a living hell? For taking my weekly allowance? See?" Diana turned to Dad, tears suddenly appearing in her eyes. "This is exactly what I've been warning you about. She doesn't respect you at all. All she cares about is money, money, money. Just like her mother." I watched Dad's face change, hardening into something I'd never seen before. He stood up slowly, his hands shaking. "Get out," he said quietly. "Diana's right, you've become exactly like your mother. Selfish, ungrateful, only thinking about yourself. I won't have another woman like that in my house. Pack your things and leave." The words hit me like physical blows. Behind Dad's shoulder, I could see Diana's triumphant smirk, quickly hidden behind a hand raised in fake distress. I ran upstairs to my room, tears blurring my vision. My hands shook as I threw clothes into my suitcase, grabbed my awards and photos, and emptied my secret stash from under the floorboard. The whole time, I could hear Diana's voice downstairs, consoling Dad, "It's not your fault, honey. Some people just can't be helped." Grandma's house was only a 15-minute drive away, but it felt like hours. She opened the door, took one look at my tear-stained face, and pulled me into a fierce hug. "He kicked me out," I sobbed into her shoulder. "He said I'm just like Mom." "Your father's a fool," she said firmly, helping me with my bags. "But you're not going to let them win. You're stronger than that." I stayed with Grandma through the summer, working at a local bookstore to save up money. She helped me research apartments near Marshall University, and when August came, she handed me an envelope. It's not much, she said, but it should cover your first few months' rent. The rest is up to you. College life was hard at first. I found a tiny studio apartment that I could barely afford, and got a job as a waitress at a cafe near campus. My schedule was brutal: morning classes, afternoon study sessions in the library, evening shifts at the cafe, then homework until midnight. But it was worth it. Every time I felt like giving up, I remembered Diana's smirk, and it gave me the energy to keep going. The years passed quickly. I made friends, earned top grades, and slowly built a new life for myself. My phone never rang with calls from home, not on birthdays, not on holidays, not even when I made the dean's list every semester. The only connection to my old life was Grandma, who called every Sunday without fail. After graduation, I was offered a position at Anderson & Mitchell, one of the top consulting firms in the city. The starting salary was more than enough for me to afford a nice one-bedroom apartment in a good neighborhood. I framed my diploma and hung it next to my job offer letter, tangible proof that I'd made it on my own. I met Mike at a coffee shop near my office. It was such a cliché. I literally bumped into him while rushing to get my morning latte, spilling his drink all over his suit. I insisted on buying him a new one, and somehow that turned into dinner that evening. Mike was different from anyone I'd ever met: kind, genuine, and completely devoted to his family. Meeting his parents showed me what a real, loving family looked like. After a year of dating, Mike took me to that same coffee shop where we'd met. He got down on one knee right there, pulling out a beautiful diamond ring. "Ashley," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "will you marry me?" I said yes through tears of joy, and the entire coffee shop erupted in applause. Later that evening, I posted a photo of us on Instagram, me showing off the ring, Mike kissing my cheek, both of us grinning like idiots. The call came exactly 1 week later. I was at work when an unknown number flashed on my phone. Something made me answer it. "Hello, Ashley," the voice sent chills down my spine. "It's been a while." "Diana?" My hand tightened around the phone. "How did you get my number?" "Oh, I have my ways," she laughed softly. "I saw your engagement announcement. Quite a lovely ring. You must be so excited to plan the wedding. What do you want?" "To help, of course." Her voice dripped with false sweetness. "You know, every bride deserves to have her father walk her down the aisle." My heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about a deal, dear. A simple transaction, really. $25,000, and I'll convince your father to reconcile with you. I'll make sure he's there to walk you down the aisle on your big day." I felt sick. "And if I refuse?" "Well," she chuckled, "let's just say your father won't be attending the wedding. You know how he is, he does everything I say. I manage all our money, and that fool doesn't even question where it goes." She kept talking, her voice growing more smug with each word. "Remember when I convinced him to kick you out? So easy. Men are such simple creatures, really. A few tears, the right words at the right time. Your father's particularly stupid that way." My hand was shaking, but not from fear. With my other hand, I'd already pulled up the voice recorder app on my work phone and hit record. Diana's voice kept flowing, detailing years of manipulation and deceit. "So what do you say, dear? 25,000 is a small price to pay for a father's love, isn't it?" I forced myself to keep my voice steady. "I need to think about it." "Don't think too long. The offer expires in a week." She hung up with a click. I sat at my desk, staring at the recording on my phone. 7 minutes and 32 seconds of Diana revealing her true nature. 7 minutes and 32 seconds that could change everything. That evening, I played the recording for Mike in our apartment. His face darkened with each passing second. "We need to send this to your father right now," he said, reaching for his phone. I put my hand over his. "No, I have a better idea." I smiled, already opening my laptop. She's always been so careful to maintain her perfect image. Let's see how she likes having her true colors shown to the world. I uploaded the recording to my social media accounts with a simple caption: "My stepmother's wedding gift demand, $25,000 to let my father walk me down the aisle. Listen to the end." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, the post had hundreds of shares. Comments flooded in, many from people who knew Diana personally. "I can't believe this is the same woman who leads our church committee. She told me you'd abandoned your family. I'm so sorry I believed her. This explains why she suddenly had that new car last year." The truth about Diana was spreading like wildfire through our small community. Her carefully constructed facade was crumbling, post by post, share by share. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was Dad. "Can you come home?" His voice sounded rough, like he'd been crying. "Please, Ashley, we need to talk." I drove the 4 hours back to my childhood home the next day. The house looked exactly the same from the outside, but something felt different. Diana's expensive SUV wasn't in the driveway. Her prized rose bushes were untended. Dad opened the door before I could knock. He looked older, tired, his hair grayer than I remembered. We stood there awkwardly for a moment before he pulled me into a tight hug. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. No sign of Diana. "She's gone," Dad said, answering my unspoken question. "I kicked her out the day after I heard that recording. Filed for divorce the next morning." He slumped into his favorite armchair, looking defeated. "I've been such a fool, Ashley. All these years, I was so blind. The way she manipulated me, turned me against you, against my own mother." His voice cracked. "I believed every lie she told me. I let her destroy our family." Tears started rolling down his cheeks. "I threw you out, my own daughter. I chose her over you. How can you ever forgive me?" I sat on the arm of his chair, like I used to do when I was little. "I forgive you, Dad." He looked up, surprised. "But," I continued, "I need time. We can't just pretend those years didn't happen. We need to rebuild our relationship, slowly." The next 6 months were a journey of healing. Dad and I started with weekly phone calls, awkward at first, but gradually becoming more natural. We met for coffee every other weekend, sometimes just the two of us, sometimes with Mike joining us. Grandma started visiting the house again, and watching Dad rebuild his relationship with her helped me believe in second chances. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings moved forward. Diana tried to fight for half of everything, but Dad's lawyer used the recording as evidence of her manipulation and deceit. In the end, she got far less than she'd hoped for. She moved out of state, and rumors said she was already looking for her next victim. But we never heard from her again. Dad started therapy, working through his guilt and understanding how he'd let himself be manipulated for so long. During one of our coffee meetings, he told me something that finally helped me understand those lost years. "After your mother left," he said, stirring his coffee absently, "I was so scared of failing you that I let someone else take control. I thought I was protecting you, but instead, I was just running away from my responsibilities as a father." The wedding planning brought us even closer. Dad insisted on helping with everything, from venue hunting to taste testing cakes. He even joined Mike's family for the rehearsal dinner, fitting in perfectly with their warm, boisterous dynamic. On the morning of my wedding, Dad arrived early at the bridal suite. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, but his hands were shaking as he knocked on the door. "Ready for this?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. I was already in my dress, Grandma putting the finishing touches on my veil. "I've been ready for this moment my whole life, Dad." He took my hand, and we stood waiting behind the church doors. The wedding march began to play. "Ashley," he whispered, "I know I missed so many important moments in your life. But I promise you, I'm here for all the ones to come." The doors opened, and we started down the aisle. I saw Mike waiting at the altar, beaming. I saw our friends and family smiling, Grandma in the front row already dabbing at her eyes. But mostly, I felt my father's arm steady and strong beneath my hand, finally being the support I'd always needed him to be. At the altar, when the minister asked, "Who gives this woman to be married?" Dad's voice rang out clear and strong, "Her grandmother and I do." Later, during the reception, I watched Dad dancing with Grandma, both of them laughing like I hadn't seen in years. Mike came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Happy?" he asked. I leaned back against him, taking in the scene before me, my family, broken and rebuilt, stronger at the mended places. More than I ever thought possible. People say you can't choose your family, but that's not entirely true. Sometimes you have to lose your family to find it again. Sometimes the happy ending isn't about everything being perfect, but about learning to love the imperfect pieces and building something new from them. Diana's been gone from our lives for months now, and good riddance. But in a way, I'm almost grateful for what happened. Without the darkness she brought, I might never have learned how strong I could be, might never have experienced the joy of rebuilding what was broken.